This operation was kept secret for 30 years. Even the US president did not know all the details. $800 million were spent to steal one thing from the bottom of the ocean. We all know that the Cold War was fought in diplomats' offices, at missile testing ranges, and in the airspace above Berlin. Spy novels tell of microfilms in parks and double agents. History textbooks describe the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Wall, the arms race. But there are stories that never made it into any textbook. Stories so unbelievable that even today they are hard to accept. In March 1968, the Soviet diesel submarine K-129 sank in the Pacific Ocean. Moscow's official version was simple. A technical malfunction, the crew perished, the boat rests on the seabed. Closed subject. Morning. Silence. The Soviet Navy conducted a large-scale search operation but stopped after a few weeks. Too deep, too far from shore, impossible to retrieve. The United States expressed official condolences. The press wrote a couple of paragraphs on the inside pages of newspapers. The world forgot about the tragedy within a week and shifted its attention to the war in Vietnam and student protests. But in the basement of Central Intelligence Agency headquarters in Langley, in a windowless room, a group of analysts began developing an operation that sounded like science fiction even for the most secret divisions of American intelligence. They were going to raise that submarine from a depth of almost 5,000 meters, intact, in total secrecy from the entire world, using technologies that did not yet exist, at a depth where pressure crushes steel like a tin can, where no human foot had ever stepped, where the darkness is absolute and the temperature is near zero. And most importantly, no one, including the Soviet Union, was supposed to know that the corpse of their submarine cruiser had just been robbed in the middle of the ocean. This was not a rescue operation. It was a theft, the most audacious theft in history. Because the target lay deeper than the Grand Canyon, weighed 2,000 tons, and was under constant observation by Soviet reconnaissance satellites and tracking ships. If Moscow had understood what had happened, the consequences could have led to open conflict, accusations of violating international law, a diplomatic scandal, possibly military escalation. But if the operation succeeded, the Central Intelligence Agency would gain access to Soviet nuclear warheads, encryption machines, and secret documents that could change the balance of power in the Cold War for years to come. This is the story of how one man from naval intelligence convinced the United States government to spend $800 million on the most expensive and insane theft in the history of intelligence. Of how they built a vessel the size of a football field with a secret shaft in the middle. Of how they deceived the entire world, including their own sailors, and of why we learned about it only 30 years after the secret ship left the port of Long Beach and set out to steal a dead submarine from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. In the spring of 1968, an explosion occurred in the Pacific Ocean, 1,500 nautical miles northwest of Hawaii. United States Navy acoustic stations recorded a sound at depth. Analysts noted the anomaly, but did not attach much importance to it. The ocean is full of strange noises. A few days later, the Soviet Navy began a large-scale search operation in the same area. Dozens of ships combed the ocean grid, dropping sonar equipment. United States intelligence watched through satellites, and then someone in Langley asked the right question: what exactly were they searching for with such desperation? The answer came through intercepted radio transmissions. The Soviet Union had lost a submarine, not off its own shores, but deep in neutral waters of the Pacific Ocean. And the most interesting part, after weeks of searching, they still could not find it. Too deep. The ocean had swallowed their vessel without a trace. In the Central Intelligence Agency Office of Naval Intelligence, this information reached John Parangosky, a short man in his 50s who had spent his entire career specializing in the Soviet submarine fleet. He knew every model, every tactic, every weakness. And when he saw the coordinates of the search operation, he immediately understood what had sunk. K-129 was not just a diesel boat. It belonged to Project 629, the Gulf II class. These were strategic submarines, carriers of ballistic missiles, 3 R-21 missiles with thermonuclear warheads of 1 megaton each, a range of 1,500 kilometers, capable of striking any city on the west coast of America. But the nuclear missiles were not the main prize. Inside the submarine were the latest generation encryption machines, communications codes of the submarine fleet, documents on missile launch tactics, torpedo guidance systems. If this boat were raised, the United States would gain access to Soviet military secrets for years to come. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There was only one problem. The boat lay at a depth of 4,900 meters, almost 5 kilometers down. At that depth, the pressure is 500 atmospheres. It crushes steel like an aluminum can. The darkness is absolute. The water temperature is just above freezing. No one had ever lifted anything from such a depth. The deepest salvage operation had been conducted at less than 1,000 meters. Engineers considered an operation at 5 kilometers technically impossible. Perengoski knew that if he proposed this idea directly, he would be laughed at. The intelligence budget was strained by the war in Vietnam. Congress was cutting funding, and he was going to ask for hundreds of millions for a project that sounded like science fiction. So Perengoski chose a different path. He turned to a man who specialized in the impossible and did it publicly, without raising suspicion. To a billionaire whose reputation as an eccentric genius allowed him to launch insane projects and no one asked unnecessary questions. To a man who could spend a fortune on fantastical technologies and it was considered normal. To Howard Hughes, aircraft designer, film producer, casino owner, a man whose name was synonymous with the American dream and boundless ambition. A man who had already worked with the Central Intelligence Agency on secret contracts and knew how to keep secrets. 1970, Los Angeles. In the office of the Hughes Tool Company, a meeting is underway. Officially, they are discussing a new project for mining mineral resources from the ocean floor. Manganese nodules, black metal lumps the size of a potato scattered across the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Theoretically a valuable resource. In practice, no one knows how to extract them from a depth of several kilometers. Howard Hughes announces to the press his company will build a revolutionary vessel, the Glomar Explorer, the most advanced deep-sea ship in the world, 188 meters long. Investments will amount to $200 million. Hughes is known for eccentric projects, so no one asks unnecessary questions. The press writes enthusiastic articles about the future of ocean mining. Engineers give interviews about revolutionary technologies. Soviet intelligence of the KGB receives a report. An American billionaire is building a civilian vessel for commercial development of the ocean floor. No threat, case closed. But in reality, every blueprint of the Glomar passes through offices of the Central Intelligence Agency. Every component is designed with one purpose: to secretly raise a Soviet submarine weighing 2,000 tons from a depth of almost 5 kilometers. At the center of the ship, engineers install a giant shaft, a moon pool, an opening in the hull 22 meters wide through which cargo can be lowered and raised while remaining invisible to satellites. From the outside, the vessel looks like an ordinary research ship. Inside, it is a giant mechanical arm reaching into the abyss. Around the shaft, a system of steel beams and hydraulic claws is constructed. A mechanical manipulator, 5 kilometers long, capable of operating under pressure of 500 atmospheres. Every component is made from special alloys. Every joint is tested repeatedly. Everything is tested. The strength of steel cables, 15 centimeters in diameter. The stability of the claws under loads of several thousand tons. A dynamic wave compensation system that keeps the vessel in one position with accuracy of 1 meter, even in a storm. One mistake at a depth of 5,000 meters, and everything will fail. The cable will snap. The claw will come apart. The submarine will sink back to the bottom, and the Soviets will learn that someone tried to steal it. 1974. July. The Glomar Explorer leaves the port of Long Beach. On board is a crew of 170 people, half of them Central Intelligence Agency personnel undercover, deep sea systems engineers, analysts of Soviet weapons, specialists in nuclear warheads. They know what they're going after. The other half of the crew, ordinary civilian sailors, sincerely believe they are taking part in a scientific expedition to mine manganese. They are paid good money. They do not ask unnecessary questions. The vessel moves slowly west. Speed 12 knots. The course is plotted so as not to attract attention. The Glomar makes stops every few days, conducts test submersions of equipment, collects soil samples, raises several kilograms of manganese nodules. Everything looks like an ordinary geological mission, but every day the vessel approaches the secret coordinates, the point where, at a depth of 4,900 meters, a dead Soviet submarine with 3 nuclear missiles rests. After 3 weeks, the Glomar reaches the target area, 5,000 kilometers from the nearest land. The ocean around is empty. The horizon is clear, the perfect place for a secret operation, but at that very moment a silhouette appears on the horizon. A Soviet trawler. It keeps a distance of 8 kilometers but does not leave. It simply drifts. Watching. In the Glomar control room, an emergency meeting is underway. The captain and John Parangoski, who flew aboard by helicopter a week earlier. The situation is critical. If the operation begins now, the trawler will notice unusual activity. The vessel will remain in one position for several days. It will lower massive equipment. The trawler will move closer. It will request explanations. It may call naval ships. The operation will fail before it begins. Parangoski contacts Langley through a secure channel. The reply comes 4 hours later. Wait. Find a way to distract the trawler or wait until it leaves on its own. The operation is not cancelled. Too much has been invested. Too much is at stake. The crew waits. 2 days. 3. The Glomar continues to imitate geological work. It lowers containers to a depth of 300 meters, raises soil, sends routine reports. The trawler does not leave, but it does not approach. On the 4th day, the weather changes. A storm rises. Waves reach 5 meters. The wind increases to 25 knots. Visibility drops to 1 kilometer. The Soviet trawler turns and heads south into calmer waters. The team has a window, perhaps 24 hours, perhaps less. This is the only chance. The team begins the operation despite the rolling. The moon pool opens. The capture system is lowered into the water. A massive steel structure weighing 1,800 tons slowly descends. Cables unwind from drums, meter by meter. 100 meters, 500, 1,000. At a depth of 2,000 meters, the pressure is so great that the steel begins to creak. Engineers monitor the stress sensors. Any spike could mean a break, but the cables hold. 3,000 meters. The darkness is absolute. Cameras are useless. The team relies only on sonar and calculations. The claw must descend exactly above the submarine. A deviation of even 10 meters and they will have to start again. 4,000 meters. The hydraulics are working at the limit. Cold water slows the mechanisms. Operators manually correct the trajectory. It is like operating a crane in darkness trying to hook a needle at a distance of 5 kilometers, 4,900 meters. Sonar registers contact. A metal object, 98 meters long, lies on the seabed at an angle. The bow is raised. The hull is partially buried in silt. It is her. The claw descends the final 10 meters. The operator adjusts position by echo signals. The beams must grip the submarine at the center of gravity. If they catch it incorrectly, the hull will break during the lift. Contact. The beams touch the hull. The hydraulics begin to close. Slowly. Any sudden movement could shift the submarine and it will slide into the silt. 20 minutes pass. The claw is closed. Sensors show the submarine is secured. The ascent begins. The cables tighten. The drums rotate in reverse. A load of almost 4,000 tons slowly lifts from the seabed. Engineers monitor every indicator: cable tension, rate of ascent, angle of tilt. One failure and everything will collapse downward. 500 meters of ascent, 1,000, 1.5 kilometers, everything goes according to plan. But at a depth of 3,000 meters, the sensors register an anomaly. The tension of one cable drops sharply. Then a second. Engineers stare at the screens. Something is happening below. Sonar shows the submarine hull has begun to collapse. 70 years of corrosion and water pressure have made the metal brittle. The beams of the claw are slowly cutting into the hull. The submarine is breaking apart in the grip of the mechanical system. The operator stops the ascent, contacts the control room. The situation is critical. If they continue, the submarine will break apart and fall back. If they stop, it will hang and slowly collapse under its own weight. Parangosky makes a decision in 30 seconds. Continue the ascent. More slowly. Try to reach at least a depth of 2 kilometers where the pressure is lower and the hull may stabilize. The ascent resumes. 2,500 meters. The sensors continue to show structural failure. Pieces of metal break off and fall into the abyss, but the main mass of the submarine holds. 2,000 meters. Sonar registers. The rear third of the hull has detached. It simply broke off and sank. With it went 2 compartments with 2 of the 3 nuclear missiles, the encryption machines, half of the documents, everything the operation was meant to obtain. But the forward section of the submarine is still in the claw, the bow compartment, the torpedo compartment, living quarters, and most importantly, 1 nuclear missile, 1 warhead, 1 set of codes. The operator continues the ascent. 1,000 meters, 500, 100. The wreckage of the submarine approaches the surface. Through the moonpool viewports, the crew sees twisted metal covered with rust. It is no longer a combat vessel. It is a corpse. Inside the sealed compartment of the Glomar specialists of the Central Intelligence Agency begin the inspection. They work in protective suits. Radiation levels are elevated, but not critical. The nuclear warhead is intact. That alone is a victory. To obtain an undamaged Soviet nuclear warhead for detailed study. Engineers open the torpedo compartment. Inside are 2 torpedoes of Type 5365. Conventional, not nuclear. But their guidance systems provide insight into Soviet underwater warfare technology. Analysts will study these mechanisms for months. Next come the living compartments. And here the team encounters something no one can prepare for. Bodies. 6 crew members who remained in the forward section of the submarine. 6 years on the ocean floor preserved them in cold water. This is no longer an intelligence operation, it is an exhumation. Parangosky gives the order: conduct identification if possible, and bury the bodies according to naval tradition with military honors. Even enemies deserve this. The crew of the Glomar conducts a ceremony. The bodies are wrapped in Soviet flags found on board and lowered into the ocean. Everything is filmed. This recording will be given to the Soviet Union 20 years later. Analysts study the documents. Most are soaked and destroyed, but some survived in sealed containers. Communication codes. Obsolete, of course. The Soviets changed them long ago. But the principle of cipher construction does not change for decades. Engineers dismantle the nuclear missile R-21. The warhead is removed and placed in a protective container. For the first time, the United States has a sample of Soviet submarine-based nuclear weaponry for study. Engineers will analyze the fuse design, material composition, and guidance system. The most valuable discovery is found in the captain's cabin, a metal safe crushed by pressure but still closed. It is opened with a cutting torch. Inside, communication logs, patrol records, coordinates of Soviet submarine positions in the Pacific Ocean in the 1960s. This information allows reconstruction of the routes of the entire Soviet submarine fleet. Analysts understand where the Soviets prefer to hide, what depths they use, how they structure patrols. This knowledge will remain relevant for 20 years. But there is a problem. The Soviet trawler has returned. It is again on the horizon, and now its presence looks suspicious. The Glomar has completed manganese mining according to the cover story. It is time to return. But the trawler does not fall behind. It follows the Glomar for 15 days until the vessel reaches Hawaii. In Moscow, analysts of the KGB compile a report. An American vessel conducted an unusually long operation in the area, where K-129 sank. A coincidence? Possibly. But there are suspicions. Recommendation: increase surveillance of United States deep-sea operations. The Central Intelligence Agency understands the secret is at risk. The Glomar Explorer becomes a toxic asset. Any new expedition will attract attention. The vessel is retired, officially due to the unprofitability of mining. In reality, because it has completed its only mission. Operation Jennifer is classified at the highest level. Even within the Central Intelligence Agency, only a few people know the full results. President Ford is briefed. Technically, the operation is successful. A nuclear warhead and partial intelligence data have been obtained. But the cost of $800 million and the results do not meet expectations. Ford decides, do not attempt again. The Soviets are alert. The risk of exposure is too high. The remaining part of K-129 will stay on the ocean floor forever. But in 1975, a leak occurs. Journalist Jack Anderson publishes an article in the Los Angeles Times. The headline: "The Central Intelligence Agency tried to raise a Soviet submarine." The article contains enough details to be credible, but not enough to reveal the full scale of the operation. The Soviet Union issues an official protest. It accuses the United States of violating maritime law and stealing property. But Moscow does not know exactly what the Americans recovered. Did they obtain missiles, codes, documents? This uncertainty forces the Soviet Union to take precautions. All submarine fleet ciphers are changed. Communication procedures are updated. Patrol routes are revised. These changes cost the Soviet Union millions of rubles in months of work. All because they are not sure which secrets fell into enemy hands. In the Cold War, uncertainty is more dangerous than real losses. John Parangosky received no public awards. His name remained in the shadows for another 20 years. Operation Jennifer was so secret that even inside the intelligence community it was spoken of in whispers. The man who conceived the impossible and carried it through to the end remained unknown. No medals, no ceremonies at the White House. Only a closed folder marked top secret and the knowledge that he had changed the course of the Cold War in a way no one would ever know. Howard Hughes died in 1976 at the age of 70, never fully knowing that his name would forever be linked to one of the most audacious operations in the history of the Central Intelligence Agency. His company received money under the contract. His reputation as an eccentric billionaire perfectly helped to cover the truth. Hughes himself, a recluse in the final years of his life, never showed much interest in the technical details of the project. For him, it was simply another profitable government contract among dozens of others. He did not know that he would enter history not as an aircraft designer or film producer, but as the man who helped steal a submarine from the bottom of the ocean. The Glomar Explorer, a unique vessel, stood abandoned in harbor for 25 long years as useless scrap metal. It slowly rusted, became covered with marine growth, turned into a monument to a secret operation no one was allowed to discuss. In 1997, the vessel was finally sold for scrap for a symbolic price. The unique deep-sea lifting mechanisms capable of operating at a depth of 5 kilometers were dismantled and cut into metal. The moon pool through which the Soviet submarine was raised was sealed with thick steel plates. Everything that made this vessel special and unique in the world was methodically destroyed. Nothing remained that could remind anyone of the incredible mission of 1974. But the story did not end there. In 2001, 27 years after the operation, the Central Intelligence Agency, under pressure from the public and historians, partially declassified some documents of Operation Jennifer. The world, for the first time, officially learned the incredible details. For the first time, it saw declassified photographs of the Glomar and diagrams of the capture system. For the first time, it heard the exact figures of how much this insane adventure cost American taxpayers. $800 million of the 1970s. Almost $4 billion in today's terms adjusted for inflation, for one operation, for one chance to steal secrets from the ocean floor. Russia, through official diplomatic channels, demanded the immediate return of all materials and equipment raised from the submarine K-129. Nuclear warheads, documents, torpedoes, personal belongings of the crew. Everything that had been removed from what they called their territorial property. The United States, in response, returned only one thing: a short video recording of the ceremonial burial of 6 crew members with full military honors. This black and white film, shot on the deck of the Glomar in July 1974, became the only public evidence of the respect American sailors showed to the fallen Soviet submariners in the middle of an absolutely secret intelligence operation. Nothing else was returned. Everything else, according to representatives of the United States, was either destroyed or remains classified for reasons of national security. The nuclear warhead that was raised from the bottom together with the missile R-21 was carefully studied by the best specialists of the Los Alamos National Laboratory for several years. Every component was dismantled. Every diagram was copied. Every secret of the Soviet nuclear program was extracted and analyzed. After the research was completed, the warhead was officially disposed of in accordance with international safety protocols. The secret communication codes and documents were digitized, integrated into intelligence databases of the National Security Agency, and used for retrospective analysis of Soviet military operations. Technical information about the design of the submarine, its weaknesses and strengths, helped engineers of the United States Navy significantly improve their own underwater detection and countermeasure systems. But the exact concrete results of the deep technical analysis, the conclusions of the specialists, the recommendations for the military, all of this remains classified to this day, more than 50 years after the operation. Operation Jennifer officially entered the textbooks of intelligence services as the most expensive intelligence theft in human history. $800 million for an attempt to steal a submarine from a depth of 5 kilometers. Critics in Congress and among historians still call it a catastrophic failure and a monstrous waste of taxpayer money. 2/3 of the submarine with the most valuable secrets remained on the ocean floor. The main encryption machines were lost. 2 of the 3 nuclear missiles returned to the abyss. Defenders of the operation in the Central Intelligence Agency and among intelligence veterans argue that even a partial success in such an ambitious and technically impossible endeavor was worth every dollar spent and every day of intense work by thousands of people. Academic debates continue among historians of the Cold War, investigative journalists, and former intelligence analysts. But one fact remains absolutely indisputable. No one before Operation Jennifer, and no one after it in all the decades that followed, has attempted anything remotely comparable in scale, audacity, and technical madness. In international maritime law and legal practice after this story, a completely new term appeared that is still used today: the Glomar Response. A specific situation when a government officially refuses to either confirm or deny any particular information, citing only national security considerations. Neither yes nor no, complete silence under protection of the law. The legal precedent arose from numerous attempts by American journalists through federal courts to obtain access to the full classified documents of Operation Jennifer under the Freedom of Information Act. The Central Intelligence Agency replied with the famous phrase, "We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the requested documents." This response became a classic. The term is actively used by lawyers, politicians, and journalists around the world when state secrets are involved. On the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, at a monstrous depth of 4,900 meters, in total darkness and icy cold, in absolute silence, the detached rear section of the submarine K-129 still lies. 40 meters of steel hull. 2 nuclear ballistic missiles, R-21 with thermonuclear warheads. The main encryption machines in the protected central compartment. Secret documents in the captain's safes. Guidance systems and launch codes. And the remains of 70 crew members who never learned that part of their sunken vessel was raised to the surface, studied and dismantled piece by piece. No one in the world is going to raise this second part. Too expensive even with modern technology. Too technically dangerous and unpredictable. And most importantly, too late by every measure. The Cold War ended long ago. The Soviet Union collapsed. The secrets are completely outdated and have lost their value. But there is an interesting detail. Every time modern nuclear submarines of the United States Navy patrol the northern part of the Pacific Ocean carrying out their secret missions, they always pass over this specific location. The coordinates are still clearly marked on classified navigation charts with a red dot and a special note. An eternal reminder to new generations of crews that the Cold War was fought not only in the sky above divided Berlin, not only along the Iron Curtain on land borders, not only in the offices of diplomats and on missile testing ranges, but also in the deepest, darkest, most technically inaccessible and hostile places on our planet, where not a single ray of sunlight ever penetrates. How many more sunken military secrets still lie on the ocean floor around the world waiting for their moment? How many submarines of different countries, military aircraft with secret equipment, intelligence vessels rest in the abyss at depths of several kilometers? How many secret recovery operations about which we know absolutely nothing were conducted and are possibly being conducted right now in the silence of the ocean depths and in the darkness of classified intelligence archives? And the most interesting question, how many of these operations remain truly successful, precisely because the world never learned about them and never will? If this incredible story showed you a completely unknown side of the Cold War that is never written about in school textbooks and is rarely discussed even in serious documentary films, be sure to subscribe to the Secret Front channel. We specialize in searching for and revealing military secrets and covert operations that governments and intelligence services hid for decades under the top secret classification. Because real history as it actually happened is always far more interesting, dramatic, unbelievable, and compelling than the dry official version written for the general public and school programs. And while you are thinking about subscribing, consider this for a moment. Operation Jennifer was officially partially declassified by the American government in 2001, 27 years after its completion, but only partially, selectively. The full technical documents of the operation, the full reports of engineers and analysts, the full results of the multi-year analysis of the recovered materials still remain closed under the highest classification. Why exactly? What is written and documented there that even 50 years after the end of the Cold War and 30 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it still cannot be officially released to historians and the public? Perhaps in reality, far more valuable materials were raised from the bottom than are publicly acknowledged. Perhaps something so secret and important was found that the general public must never know under any circumstances. The ocean reliably keeps its countless secrets at monstrous depths of several kilometers, where human beings are almost helpless. But sometimes, in rare moments of history, Someone in government or intelligence decides that some of these secrets are too valuable and too important for national security to remain buried on the seabed forever. And then begins the most expensive, most risky, most technically impossible theft in the history of human civilization. The theft of a dead submarine from a depth of 5 kilometers. A theft that secretly changed the balance of power in the Cold War. A theft whose full results we learned only 30 years later. And perhaps we still do not know the whole truth.